TV advertising has been around for a very, very long time, longer than I've been alive, longer than most of you have been alive. But has it really changed in the fact of generating leads if you are marketing to motivated sellers? Today, I've got my good friend Tony Javier with 10X TV on the show. And there's a few things that we dive deep into that really aren't talked about when it comes to advertising on TV. Tony has a service that specializes with real estate investors to get people on TV in their local market in order to be able to generate motivated seller leads. Now, you might be thinking like, that's an outdated method of marketing, and that's something that like costs way too much money. I've tried it before, that sort of thing. But there's a few questions that I actually dig deep with Tony here that, you know, a lot of people don't ask the question and it's not talked about a lot. But I think that there's a few tricks, if you will say, that make a whole lot of sense for active real estate investors to actually utilize TV, especially depending on your market and especially depending on the demographic you're going after. It's all about the mindset in the marketing. If you are marketing to a very specific demographic, you've got to make sure you're utilizing a medium to reach them in which they are going to be hanging out or watching. And what do people that are the 50 plus range do? They watch TV and they don't care about skipping ads. They don't care about muting the TV when a commercial comes on and that sort of thing. Most people just don't bother doing that because that's the way they grew up and lived in their childhood and all the way into the middle age until the last 10 years. And they really don't even bother with skipping or muting the ads. So putting out TV ads could potentially be a really good lead generation tool for an active real estate investor. So I have Tony Javier to talk about it today. There's a lot of tips and tricks that we talk about, how to utilize it the best, how to not utilize it the best, the mistakes that he's made, the mistakes that he's seen people make that he works with, and we dive into a lot of really great things. So if you're interested in doing TV, maybe you are doing it and you're doing it yourself, you don't have somebody that's facilitating for you, or you are thinking about it and you haven't done it, or you just need to be convinced, this is going to be a great episode for you. So make sure you listen in, take notes, enjoy the episode, and if you are interested in connecting with Tony, there is going to be links down in the description below for you to connect with him and learn more about working with him on your TV advertisement with 10X TV. So without further ado, you guys enjoy the episode. Here's Tony Javier. What's going on, guys? Josh Culler here, back with the REI Marketing Weekly, and I've got a really good episode for you today. A lot of people have been talking about TV, and TV has been around. I mean, Tony, TV has been around for a very long time, obviously. But I feel like from a real estate investor perspective, especially people leveraging it for marketing specifically, I mean, I've been in the space for 13 years, and I just started hearing about TV being taken seriously probably within the last 4 or 5 years. It's been more recent, which is really interesting because, again, TV's been around for a while. So I'm very interested in today's topic. We have had a couple of people talk about TV and like how they're doing it, you know, here and there, but we actually have Tony Javier today, who is owner of 10X TV, and we'll talk about how you guys can connect with him later on if you want to. But today we're going to 100% focus on TV and marketing through TV advertisement to generate motivated seller leads. But Tony, first of all, good to have you on, man. It's great to see you healthy and, you know, kicking it as hard as you can. I want to be able to start with this conversation of you talking about the value of TV and kind of where it's gone over the last couple of years. Cause I think maybe it's one of those, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like TV is one of those things. It's similar to direct mail and to where it really doesn't change much from a formatting perspective, but maybe messaging and stuff like that changes. So where are we at? It's fourth quarter 2024. Where are we at with TV? How is it being utilized and what's getting the best results right now?
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'll kind of give a quick background about myself and how I started TV. So I've been in the space for 23 years, started in 2001. I discovered TV 12 years ago, kind of by accident. There's a whole long story behind it, but I stumbled across it. Someone that I'd met at a poker game was on TV, and I'd actually recognized this guy, and kind of had this whole celebrity factor thing, and just kind of struck up a conversation with him. You know, as the guy that I normally wouldn't have talked to just because I'm introverted by nature. And when I asked him about TV, his eyes kind of lit up. He's like, dude, this is like, TV is insane. And I expected him to say what a lot of people think about TV. I was expecting him to say, we do it for branding, that it's really expensive, and that's why we do it. But it was the complete opposite. He was like, we get so many leads, so many calls. He's like, that is the only lead channel that we have. He's like, we do millions of dollars of revenue from TV commercials, and we're 6 to 9 months booked out just from leads that come from TV commercials. And this guy ran a construction company. And so through the conversation, he's like, hey, you should talk to my guy, Drew. He, he's the one that helped me with TV and do the ad buying and, the production, all that good stuff. So Monday morning, I called Drew and I said, hey, Drew, I heard you're the TV guy. Tell me about it. And again, this was 2012, and no one in the space that I knew of was on TV. It was just one of those things that people didn't think about that, which is good, because if you know TV and you understand TV and you can figure out TV, it's something that not a lot of people are doing, especially back then. So he went to the stations. He said, hey, I'm going to go to the stations. I'm going to negotiate some rates for you. He's like, I think I know what your avatar is. I'll come back to you, and if you like what I have as far as the schedule is concerned, then we can produce the commercial and go. I said, great. So he comes back to me about a week later, and he's like, man, I was able for $3,000 to get, it was like somewhere between 300 to 400 commercials a month. And so I'm like, that's a no-brainer. That's like a small direct mail campaign, right? Yeah. So first month I spent $3,000, made $35,000 my first month, and I was off and running. And so throughout the years, Collective Genius in 2015, I joined. It was me and Brad Chandler. We're the only two out of 100 plus real estate investors that were doing TV commercials. And then I joined Investor Fuel in 2020, I want to say. And there was only one other person in that mastermind as well doing TV commercials. Yep. And once he heard we were doing what we were doing, he actually came to us to help perfect his system. And he's still a client to this day. So TV is one of those things, again, just based on what you said, that people don't think about a lot, right? It's been around for a long time. And I'll give you some statistics to help you understand how prevalent TV still is today. So there was a study, I think it was last year, for people that were 50 and older with household income under, I think it was 100,000, which is basically our avatar, right? Older people that are kind of lower income. And there was two different types of data. One of them was how much of TV they watched per day, which this is them getting surveyed, right? So someone says they watch 2.5 hours per day. It's probably longer, right? But that was the average, was 2.5 hours per day they were still watching TV, regular TV. And then they were also asked, when you did an online search, what typically triggers an online search? And 47% of the people said that their number one reason that they searched online for something was because of a TV commercial. So it's something that, again, people think TV is just branding, TV is going away, which numbers have slipped a little bit. But when you look at the numbers of where they are now, if you compare them to, 10, 15 years ago, sure, they've gone down some, but there's still a huge viewership. Yep. People think that TV is really expensive, and usually for most markets, about $5,000 a month can get you hundreds and hundreds of commercials a month. And then people just think they have to be these big businesses to be on TV. So I'm very fortunate that I was able to find TV 12 years ago. And then about 4 years ago, I had someone that was like, man, you've been doing TV for a long time. Why don't you show people what you're doing? And, we had tried multiple scripts throughout the years. We had tried multiple schedules, shifting things around from different TV shows and different stations. So we had about 8 years worth of data where we just tested a lot of different things. And so I went to a bunch of people that I knew. Dean Rogers, who a good friend of mine, he was one of the first people I reached out to. I reached out to about 8 different people, and I said, hey, I've got this formula. I'm pretty sure it'll work in other markets. It worked for me very fast. Would you let us implement TV commercials for you, and we'll do basically everything for you? And I reached out to my guy, Drew, who I mentioned to you, super guy, like the number one vendor out of all the vendors I've had in the 23 years. And that's why I was able to do this, is I really trusted him, and he's got a great team. So we teamed up on this, and I said, hey, Drew, if I can get these 8 investors on TV, they've already committed to doing it. Can you do the ad buying for us? Can you help do the production? We already have all the data between, what him and I had worked on. And lo and behold, almost the exact same results as I got, they got right off the bat. And in the fact that they were getting calls almost day one, they were getting contracts lined up their first month. The credibility factor, people just like reaching out to them and being like, hey man, I saw your commercials. And, when they went to meetups, people being like, oh, hey, you're Dean, I seen your commercials. I mean, just all kinds of different benefits from TV. So I'm very fortunate that, one, I found TV when I did, and two, that I have a lead channel that's already done a lot of work for me, meaning that a lot of our demographic watches TV. So when you pair up a lead channel that you can get exposure to so many people, and especially the people that are our avatar, which again is older people, lower income, that have houses that they're wanting to sell that are typically cheaper, it's just a perfect formula for success. And so to this day, we have 110 real estate investors running TV with us. I mean, we're crushing it with TV still 12 years later. We have, a lot of great clients, a lot of big names running TV with us. And it's just been a blessing to not only be able to have TV in our arsenal to help my flipping business, but also to be able to provide that to other people as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love all the context you gave there. I have a few questions based off of what you talked about. I want to come back to the avatar thing here in a second. But one of the things that you said, when Dean started up, you got the same or similar results. At least I don't know if you said similar or same results, but either way, you chop it up, close results is like, as long as you follow the proper formula, is it pretty predictable in the type of results it's going to get you as long as you follow like down to a T that the strategies that you guys have set out? Is that because so context wise, as good as I know, when it comes to marketing in different channels, the prediction process of like determining if I send out X amount of mailers or I run X amount of dollars on a Facebook ad or whatever, the results can be extremely subjective depending on the execution. When it comes to TV, are you saying that they're pretty predictable as long as you follow a certain formula, or how do you shake that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two sides of it. One is how effective the TV commercials are at driving leads. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is, what are the results on the back end? And some of that, or a lot of that, doesn't even have to do with us. The sales process,
sure,
their strategy and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So on this side, I can talk more confidently about this side, and the fact that when we launch someone on TV, very rarely after 30 days does someone come back to us and say, I'm not getting very many leads and I'm not very happy. And that's a combination of TV being a great channel to get in front of the right people. But you think about it, if you look at the numbers, so when I don't tell this story a lot, but back in 2005 was actually my first experience with TV. I just out of the blue thought to myself, maybe, and I'd been in the business 4 years at that point. Phone book was my number one lead channel at that point. And I thought to myself, just randomly one day, I was like, I wonder if TV commercials would work. So I reached out to NBC. I reached out to one station, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about getting on TV. What do you think you can do? And I remember them coming back to me and going, oh, I think we know what you're, kind of like Drew did, but way different experience. They came back to me and they said, I think we know how we can get in front of buyers. And then they gave me this they started this presentation. I said, hey, stop. I'm not looking for buyers. I'm looking for sellers, right? So that was the first obstacle with them, is explaining who my avatar was. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that before. When you go to a vendor who's never worked with real estate investors before, they're you have to explain to them what you're looking for. They don't understand it. So that was the first obstacle. The second obstacle is that I knew nothing about TV, and it was kind of like me representing myself in court, or me being the buyer's agent for my own house transaction. I didn't know what I didn't know. So they came back to me and they said it was like $2,500 to $3,000. It was about the same ad spend that Drew had given me many years later, but they only gave me like 35 to 50 commercials a month, right? So that's one commercial a day. And if you hit the right people at the right time, then obviously that could work, right? So I ran for 3 months and I didn't get much out of it. And I literally, the day that I canceled, it was like a day later that I got a call from the commercials that were still running, and I was able to get a deal under contract. I wholesaled it for like 10 grand and I ended up even. And knowing what I know now, I wish I would have kept it longer, because sometimes, things just take a little bit longer. But fast forward 7 years later, that same $3,000 ad spend going to someone that knew what they were doing, understood the avatar, was more on my side than they were on the TV station side. They were trying to sell me stuff that was a little more expensive, that just didn't reach quite as many people. So if you think about it, 30 or so commercials a month from 7 years before in 2005, and then 7 years later, I'm getting 300 to 350 commercials a month. So part of the success is just being able to get so much exposure, because if you're on air 10 times a day, if someone's watching TV that's our avatar, there's a pretty decent chance that if they don't see you, every day, they're seeing you at least every other day, or at least every third day, where you're in their mind, so that when they are ready to sell, that you're front of mind, that they're probably going to call you.
Yeah. No, that's great. Now that leads me into like going back into the conversation of, demographic. So obviously we're talking specifically about generating motivated seller leads. Now, if you're somebody that is in my age bracket or even younger than me, so I'm 31 right now, and even younger than me, if you're running TV advertising, it's pointless. Like if you're trying to target me as my age, right? Like I grew up in the era where there was still, by the way, in 2005, I was in 7th grade, Tony. So I don't remember much of what was going on. But
I just did a podcast with a 21-year-old, and I'm like, dude, I've been in business longer than you've been alive.
It's always the kids that are like, oh, I was born in 2004. Like, okay, you shake it off. But anyway, so like the landscape of like, obviously when I was growing up, like TV ads were a thing, right? You were getting hit with like Lego ads and stuff like that. But like the demographic that you're going after in that age bracket that you talked about, so 50 plus and, a little bit of an older demographic, they grew up 100% of the time on TV, and that's kind of the consumption model that they had. And again, it's all dependent on the demographic you're going after. So I want you to speak to people that are listening right now that really don't believe in TV ads, if you haven't already gotten the information from Tony. I do want you to speak on like demographic and what the mentality behind it. I want to dig deeper into, well, it's just because they're this age, or they're this like, their tendencies are this. Like what truly is circling around the demographic, and why TV is actually hitting them versus like, if you're marketing to somebody my age or younger or whatever, what does that cadence look like? And again, you talked about like if you're running multiple ads on a weekly basis, you're more likely to hit them. But again, like I think a lot of concerns that people have, and you tell me, is, I can't control when I'm hitting them. A Facebook ad, I can control when it's in the feed and that sort of thing. But a TV ad, they have to be sitting in front of the TV, not looking at their phone, not taking a sip of their Coke when my commercial comes on, stuff like that. What kind of like, from the demographic perspective, solutions do you have when it comes to that kind of conversation?
Yeah, so if you think about it, I said 50 plus. I'd say our demographic is probably a little more like 60 plus, but let's call it 50 plus. So, let's say when they were 10 years old, maybe even 5 years old, we'll call it 10 years old. So 50 minus, so that's 40 years ago. So 40 years ago was mid 80s, right? So mid 80s, even in the 70s, especially in the 60s, TV was a privilege. In the 80s, it became more of like, almost every household had a TV for the most part. Mm-hmm. But those that grew up in definitely the 60s and 70s, it was more of a privilege, right? I don't think every TV had a house, or every household had a TV. In the 80s, you started having probably almost every household that had a TV. In the 90s, multiple TVs per household, right? So, and that was the only thing. Like in the 80s, think about it. There was radio and there was TV and newspaper, right? There wasn't Facebook, there wasn't Netflix, there wasn't anything streaming, there weren't smart TVs. There were actually TVs that were probably like that big, And so that's how people grew up. And when you look at people from that older era, I should say, I think their tendencies are a little more, what do you call it? It's kind of harder for them to change, right? So if they grew up on
that was the credibility piece growing up, was the TV in the household.
It was a privilege for them to have a TV. And like even my mom to this day, she watches Jeopardy. And I remember when I was probably 10 years old, definitely 15 years old, she was watching Jeopardy. 30 years later, she's still watching Jeopardy, right?
Same things.
And, yeah. And so, if you're a real estate investor that goes into houses, think like pay attention now. When you go into houses, I would bet you 50% of the time the TV is probably on. They got the TV on. They're just watching it, either watching it or they're doing something and they're still listening and kind of like halfway watching it, right? And so is that going to shift in the next 20 to 30 years where, regular TV doesn't work as well and streaming works better? Probably. But we've already tested streaming and a lot of the other, over the top, and there's a bunch of different kind of streaming services. We've actually tested those and they don't work nearly as well. Part of it is because the older demographic isn't watching those quite as much, our avatar. And the other part of it is there's not as much credibility with those because people are streaming those and they're not quite like Facebook ads, but the credibility they have is similar to Facebook ads, where there's like a tiny bit of credibility, but it's not nearly as much as regular TV. Because, you think about the big brands that became big brands. It was because of TV, all the cereal commercials, the insurance commercials, those big brands that spent a bunch of money nationwide to put their brands on TV. That's how they got credibility. So now when you get on TV, you're still getting that credibility because people think that if you're on TV, you're willing to put your name and face out there. So you're probably not a scam. And they think you're a bigger business and they think you're spending a bunch of money. They think you're spending, like Chad, the guy that I met at the poker game. I wouldn't have been surprised if he said we were spending, $30,000 a month on TV. Knowing what I know now, he didn't tell me what he was spending, but I bet he's only spending about $10,000 a month for his business. And so, it's kind of like the perfect storm in a good way. You have older demographic, you're hitting a ton of people. And the other thing that TV does as well, not just like the credibility and the leads and all that, but you're hitting people that other people aren't hitting. So if you think about direct mail, texting, cold calling, those types of lead generation models, they're great, but everybody else is buying those lists. I mean, you have probably hundreds of people that are buying those lists. And when you look at and you compare it to TV, in my market, I've had up to 4 or 5 people competing with me at one point. And even at the top, it was probably a year or 2 years ago, I was like, oh man, there's a lot of people that are jumping on TV because I kind of started talking about it publicly. And so people in my market saw that and they tried TV and I think a lot of them fell off. But even with 4 or 5 people running TV, like we were still crushing it with TV. Because if you think about it, if you compare it with people that are doing other marketing methods, I mean, 1 out of 4 to 5 people on TV compared to 1 out of, 25, I know what it is, 30, 50, maybe 100 people hitting the same leads or hitting the same list with like direct mail and things of that nature.
Interrupting this podcast episode to tell you guys that this podcast is managed and produced by Color Media Productions. Yes, shameless plug, that's my company. However, we do this for a lot of other people as well. Most people that we work with are in the real estate investing space. So if you're listening to this podcast specifically, you probably are a real estate investor, given it's called the REI Marketing Weekly. If you're somebody that either wants to start a podcast or you have one going and it's becoming a little bit of a hassle, you're looking to transition to somebody that works a little bit better with a fluid motion in terms of you get the recordings done and then they do everything else. Well, that's what we do. We do fully managed podcasts from start to finish, video, audio, show noting, the graphics, publishing, everything that goes into it. It's a full service business that we run here in a service for you as a real estate investor if you are running a podcast. Additionally, we also do social media and YouTube management as well. So all of that being on the organic side, if you are interested in learning more about working with us and just recording content with guidance and strategy set by myself personally, and then not doing anything else after that, where we're taking care of everything from start to finish, then make sure you go check us out at cullermedia.com, CULLER media.com. Hit us up there and we can learn more about working together, hop on a phone call and see what we could do for you. Now back to the episode. Sure. No, I'm glad you went in that direction as well. And then like in the previous conversation, you were talking about tendencies and behaviors. Like it is important to understand, especially marketing 101. I tell people all the time, you need to make sure you understand your demographic better than they know themselves. Like know them better than they know themselves. And even in the subconscious, like you said, I mean, my grandfather, like when I was growing up, it was always watching John Wayne and Westerns and stuff like that. And you walk into his house today, he's still doing the same thing. And he's doing it on direct TV. He's not streaming it. He's still doing it on direct TV, right? So it's still on network-based channels. And the important part to understand about what Tony said was that like they have the demographic has a certain way they do things, just like my demographic has a certain way of doing things and our tendencies and blah, blah, blah. But if they have this certain way of doing things, it's going to continue on throughout their entire lifetime, whether that media, like maybe the TV's got small, like thinner and bigger and that sort of thing, but the technology is different, but the tendencies are going to be the same. So that understanding of why the demographic is important to like really lock down for your marketing when it comes to TV is that's what I wanted you to dig into. So I'm glad you did go in that direction. Now I want to utilize the last few minutes here to dig into some like best practice stuff. Obviously, if somebody really wants to take TV seriously, they're going to connect with you and have you guys manage it and work on it and everything. But in terms of like, if you're in a market, let's say you're in a market that you're, maybe it's a good sized metropolitan market, you're in Indianapolis, Indiana, you're in Kansas City or in Dallas or whatever. What are some of the best practices that you could do on TV to be able to, you know the whole thing. I'm sure you get this. Stand out, Tony. How do I stand out when there's other people running commercials? What do you typically answer with? Is it a matter of like the messaging's different, the way you carry yourself is different? How does that look? Like, how do you stand out in TV?
Well, the good thing, like I kind of hinted to or mentioned, is, a lot of people try TV on their own or try with, someone that has no idea how to run ads for a real estate investing company, and they've done, maybe other companies. And
like you did in 2005.
And typically they don't last. They just kind of fall off. So by doing it right, number one, you're going to stand out. So to do it right, I'll give you, I don't know, at least three things that I think you can take away from this that you can use for TV commercials and you can use for all kinds of marketing, right? So let me give you an example. Have you ever driven down the street and you see a billboard, and the billboard has like a pretty nice, clean message, but you have no idea who the company is or no idea what they do? The other day I was driving, and because I'm in marketing and all this, I kind of pay attention to stuff. But I saw a billboard and I'm like, I've seen that billboard 100 times. Like what business is that? So they had this slogan really big, got milk. It was something like that, but it catered to their business, and it caught your attention. But then I looked at it and I thought to myself, I'm going to try and figure out if I remember who this is without looking at the rest of the billboard. And I couldn't remember. So I looked at the billboard. It was right across from a coffee shop that I go to every once in a while. And their logo was like this big, right? Like on this huge billboard. And so multiple things you can take away from that. Number one, they had something good and catchy, which is good. You want a good headline. Their logo wasn't big enough. You couldn't see it. And they had no call to action. Today, you can get a hold of a company so many different ways. You can Google search them. You can go directly to their website. You can call them, and I may be missing one or two others. So people these days just need to have a call to action. So compare what I just mentioned on that billboard to someone who does it right, which is Geico. Geico catches your attention with the little gecko. Everybody knows the gecko. And then you may not know the slogan 100%, but you get the gist of it. Give us 15 minutes and we'll save you up to 15% on your car insurance.
Yep.
And then they have their call to action, which is go to geico.com. Like they have it down. And there's commercials that I see that I just pull my hair out because they have this great commercial. It's super funny. It's super engaging. And then at the very end, they put their logo at the end, and they may or may not put a website or call to action on there. And they're spending all of this money, and they're just not doing what I feel like they should be doing to try and capitalize on the airtime that they're getting.
Yeah, when you do that, you're relying on the consumer to go look for you. But they're not going to. Like, they're not going to give effort to try to find you. And especially the whole thing of, like, if they spell your company name incorrectly and they end up on somebody else's website, they're going to be aggravated, give up, and then the search is over. Like, it has to be clear-cut call to action.
Not only that, but you don't want them to find your competition.
Yeah.
So
even worse. When they go door knocking, they go to the next one.
Yeah, my company's professional home buyers. So if they type in professional home buyers, we're going to be number one on the organic search. But there's other people probably bidding.
Yeah, they got those ads.
The ads are going to come. I mean, we bid on them too, but there's a good chance they're going to potentially click on somebody else's ad, and all of a sudden, I just gave someone else the business.
Of course.
So call to action is huge. Having an easy to remember phone number. Like, I feel like that's kind of marketing 101 for, like, postcards aren't as big of a deal, right? You have a postcard in your hand, people can sit there and they can dial. But when you're talking about a billboard, a bandit sign, a TV commercial, like having something that they remember, like for us, our number is 685-SELL. So at the end of every commercial, we say, if you've been thinking about selling your house, give us a call at 685-SELL. That's 685-7355. So 685-SELL, they remember. And if somebody else is on TV and they may or may not say their phone number, by me saying 685-SELL at the end of that, they remember the number, like they're hearing the phone number over and over, and they know that it's me as opposed to someone else who may just have a random phone number, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't push websites super hard, but if you're going to put a website on your on any marketing piece, even if it's direct mail, you want it to be as short and condensed as possible. So one domain we have is prohomebuyer.com. We have prohomebuyers.com. And if wichitahomebuyers.com was available, we would have bought that. So something that's 3 words or less and as short as possible. Because like you had mentioned, like if I put Tony buys houses in Wichita, Kansas.com, which sounds stupid, but I've actually had someone come to us and say, hey, my commercials aren't working. I tried them on my own. I heard you guys are the ones to go to. And that was his domain. It was like John buys houses in his market.com. It was so long. Yeah. And if they got one letter wrong in that whole domain, it's gonna pop up as, they can't find it. So either they're gonna think they're out of